have to. Hey, I'm Noah Smith, and I'm here with PEG, which stands for Pascal-Emmanuel Gobry.
Yes.
How was my pronunciation?
That's pretty good. That's pretty good. So welcome Noah to the Sphere podcast. You challenged me. You challenged me, sir. Not to a duel, not yet, but to a debate on immigration. And I'll debate anybody. And I do think it can be an interesting debate. So since you fired the first shot, go ahead.
Right. Well, anyway, I'm trying to do more debates. After on Econ 102, I did a debate with Oren Cass. It turned out really well, and
Cool.
then I did a debate with Aaron McIntyre,
Oh,
um,
cool.
and then that turned out okay. Um, yeah, we ended up getting very sidetracked on that, but I think it turned out okay anyway.
Well, that
So
can be fun too.
yeah. Anyway, immigration. So the background here is that I thought we should have a debate because we were arguing about something on Twitter, and I forget what it was that we were arguing about, and it wasn't immigration. It was actually something else.
Yes. Yeah. No. So you.
Wait, what were we
I
arguing about?
remember
Do you
it's
remember?
this Twitter crap
Yeah,
that just
yeah,
that just goes. You challenged Mehdi Hassan to a debate.
that is true.
And I said, well, I'll debate Mehdi Hassan too. And that's when you DM'd me and said, you and I should have a debate. And
Got it.
then I said you could pick the topic, and you picked immigration.
Well, yeah, because I figure immigration is something that everybody likes to shout about, and so
Yes.
we might as well talk about it as a hot button issue. I was going to write a book about it, so I read about 30 books about immigration and assimilation and
Wow.
related issues.
So I'm very outmatched.
Hmm. I am a I am a bit of a scholar now, I feel.
You're a
That
bit
was,
of a scholar.
that was in 2018-19.
That's that. I'm only I'm just a guy with a Twitter account. So I'm already overmatched.
That's all
Uh,
anyone really is these days.
I
Um,
mean, I get so there. I guess there's two kinds of debates. There's this sort of philosophical debate, which I think is important, which is what I believe is that any country's immigration policy should be based on the interests of its current and future citizens, as opposed to sort of humanitarian concerns, as opposed to sort of abstract rules, as opposed to sympathy for other people who would have a better life if they were in France rather than Mali, or in the US rather than Honduras. I think that's an important philosophical debate, because the thing I've noticed, especially on the American left, for the past since the Trump era, or I don't know, is a sort of devaluing of the very notion of the nation state and of the very notion of borders. And there's a huge segment of the left, including a federal district judge last week, that clearly believes that any form of border enforcement, any form of saying, look, not everybody gets to come, sorry, is tantamount to some sort of, horrible Hitler type thing. And I think that's extremely dangerous, because so far as we know, the nation state is the only political form we know that sort of works well. And it's dependent on having borders, having rules for who gets to live there, who doesn't get to live there, who gets to be a citizen, who doesn't get to be a citizen, and having those rules be enforced by the state. And so I think the sort of open borders thing on the left is frankly very concerning for me as a sort of centrist moderate. So I guess
hmm.
that's the philosophical thing, or we can do the econ thing.
Well, the thing is that this debate is apparently off to a very poor start because I agree with everything you just said. And I think that almost everybody agrees with this. Like there are a few people who think that borders are some sort of like injustice that needs to be fought, but they're tiny. There's a tiny percentage. Like almost no Democrats in America think that.
In
Um,
opinion polls, sure.
Yeah, if you just
But
ask people, like, should nations have borders? Should they decide to control who gets in and who doesn't? People would be like, yeah. And
yeah,
then if you just walk up to people on the street, or even if you walk into like some like lefty party in Brooklyn, and you ask people this, like some people will say, a few people will say no, but they're trolling, and maybe they really believe that shouldn't exist. And then there's a few wacky libertarians like Brian Kaplan, who think open board is a great idea, but like I think it's really hard to find people, who like the idea of open borders. It's easier to find people who reflexively oppose every form of border enforcement to the point where they sort of accidentally back into being de
right,
facto open borders people.
right,
But it's hard to find people who support it in the abstract philosophical sense.
right. Well, I mean, this is like saying they don't support four, they just support 2 plus 2. Like
Well, no, it's not.
they have views that just sort of naturally lead them to supporting that policy, whether it's de
Sure,
facto or whether they have
sure.
this sort of full thing in their head.
Um, Yeah, no, I mean, of course, that's right. If what we care about is which policies people like support, then that does matter. Or which policies they indirectly support by voting for candidates. But the thing is that if people are supporting policies that don't fit their philosophical idea of what a nation state should be, then it's actually, I think, fairly easy to flip them by giving them more information about what's going on. Because I think often these people don't understand what's going on, the facts on the ground. They don't understand how the policy opinions that they formed from watching the news lead to conclusions they don't want. They just
Right.
don't understand. People are poorly informed. And I think that, you know, dealing with poorly informed people by like attacking them en masse is suboptimal, and I think that instead we should just inform them better. And you know this is exactly what Trump did, right? So or not even Trump, but the red state governors took the all of these quasi legal immigrants, these people who cross the border illegally but then turn themselves into to border security and get request an asylum hearing and get to stay in America in the meantime. Let's call them quasi legal immigrants, because they're illegal and then they're legal afterwards. But then what the red state governor started doing during Biden's term was shipping them all to New York and to other blue cities, mostly on the East Coast, and it caused this massive backlash against specifically that kind of immigration, because people didn't know what the hell was going on. It wasn't that people understood what was going on and simply thought, ha ha ha, those Texans can suck it, those Floridians can suck it. It wasn't
Maybe,
just
maybe
that,
a
but
little.
I mean, I'm sure there's a few people in Brooklyn who do think that way. But I guess more to the point,
Yeah,
people
yeah, yeah.
didn't understand what was going
Yeah,
on, and once it
I'm
arrived on
joking,
their
but I take
doorstep,
your point.
they got it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I I guess we're sort of talking past each other because you're talking about like opinions of voters in opinion polls, and like Democratic voters are largely quite moderate. I'm talking, and again, I'm saying like this is a drift. I'm not saying this, this is what the Democratic Party is. I'm just saying I have watched this sort of change in the discourse over the past few years, and it worries me, which is the sort of I I hate that word. The elites, the sort of tastemakers, the sort of intellectuals and activists of the Democratic Party, and activists are very powerful in the Democratic Party. That may change in the future, but for now they're still extremely powerful. Like you do see a lot of people and they're who sincerely believe that and that no one is illegal, right? No human is illegal. Like I have seen that poster with my own very eyes in like fancy neighborhoods in lots and lots of blue cities in the US, and like it's the same thing as maybe if you sit down these people and like, oh, do you really agree with like a billion people coming here, they would say, oh no, maybe. So they don't believe four, but they believe 2 plus 2, and so it is worrying and it is strange, and it is a shift from the sort of 2008 Obama era thing where Obama would say, look, I'm for border enforcement, I'm for deporting people who shouldn't be here, blah blah blah, and it's in the national interest of America to sort of legalize some of the people who are here and allow more people, which is a very, very different position than no human is illegal. You know
Right.
what I mean? And
Right,
and
exactly.
I
And
do,
so
you
it's
know,
affective. Like the idea no human is illegal. It's it's people see the word illegal, they don't like it. It feels like you're, impugning a whole class of people, right? And you're saying, "Oh, you are illegal as a person, you have no rights, we can just abuse you however we like." And they don't like that, so and they have a point because do you know the Parsley Massacre? Have you ever heard of the Parsley Massacre?
no.
Okay, so the Dominican Republic borders Haiti. The Dominican
Yeah.
Republic is much more economically successful. Many
Yes.
Haitian people illegally immigrated to
Yes.
Dominican Republic in the early 20th century in order to work in Haiti. I'm sorry, in order to work in the DR.
Right.
The Dominicans didn't like this, and
Yes.
they had a dictator named I think it was Raul Trujillo, and he basically said, we'll kick him out or kill him." And so he sent guys around to say, "¿Cuál es esto?" And like, "What is this?" And then if they and it's parsley, like esperejil, right? And like, if you can't say
Right.
that because you're a French speaker,
Ah,
you
right. I see.
die. Or if you're just nervous,
Right.
so French or
Right.
nervous, you're dead.
Right.
And so they killed, most of the Haitian migrants. There was, maybe less than 100,000, I think, but it was quite a lot, many tens of
Yeah.
thousands, and they slaughtered them with machine guns, and then the Haitians didn't come again. So, but I don't think Americans. I don't think America's going to send out ICE with machine guns to slaughter people who aren't here in the country if they can't pull out their birth certificate.
And I don't want them to.
Right. But when you see what they are doing, there was that hairdresser guy who was like raped in a Salvadoran prison. You've got US citizens being randomly pulled off the street and detained for like weeks because like someone just thought they looked their face looks like an illegal immigrant face ought to look, and they put them in a thing, and they, of course, they don't have their papers with them, so they throw them in a cell while they get their papers, and then they let them out. And then, or at the border you see citizens being detained, and then of course you see people who actually are here illegally getting treated fairly badly. Alligator Alcatraz, like that's the conditions there are just horrible, like women being forced to poop in front of men, and like just all kinds of like just terrible conditions in that detention center. And so I think the statement "no human is illegal" it's a nonsense statement, right? It's affective. It's purely just an emotional response to the word illegal applied to a person. But when you look at the actual policies the Trump administration feels that it's entitled to do to people who are here illegally, that looks bad, and I don't like it.
A, a couple points. So first of all, you know, the kind of people who post these signs, they all have graduate degrees from like prestigious institutions, and they all, are in their 30s and 40s and have like six-figure jobs working for NGOs or universities or healthcare systems or things like
Or
that. they're not
Google.
they're not they're not 19-year-olds. You know what
No.
I mean? They're responsible adults, and they're not shooting it when they're not saying it when drunk at a party. They made the affirmative positive decision to purchase a sign and put it on their lawn for the entire world to see. This is like one of the top three most important things, I believe. Yeah, like
Right.
that. I mean, I just find that just astonishing. Um, that's number one. Number two, on the whole immigration enforcement thing, I mean, so first of all, I don't want to get into a factual discussion about like which reports of what atrocities and alleged atrocities are true or not. Um, because I let me concede that there's probably some horrible shit, and hopefully you can concede that a lot of those reports turn out to be false, because a lot of them did turn out to be false. Like the infamous quote unquote Maryland dad who turned out to actually be a gang member and actually a human trafficker and a wife beater and apparently somebody who collected child porn. And a senator, the Maryland senator, flew to El Salvador to have his photo taken with him. So there's all sorts of stories in both directions. I like, enforcing rules is always ugly, and I find it always striking that the ugliness of enforcement catches a form of attention that isn't caught, or that isn't focused on the ugliness of what happens when you have unchecked mass third world immigration into a country, which
Right.
also causes a lot of very real human suffering. Um,
Right.
and
So it's basically just people, saying, just focusing on different, sort of
yeah,
extreme cases, and thinking about those extreme cases and getting upset about those extreme cases, and
yeah,
then advocating, policies based on doing whatever the opposite of those extreme cases are.
right,
And so that's not a constructive way to deal with the situation, in my view.
okay,
I think if you want illegal immigrants to leave, I feel like the easy way to do that is just prevent them from getting jobs. You just, you audit companies. You say, look, you're hiring these guys. You pay a fine. Like, we're not going to send jackbooted thugs onto your lawn and break down your door. We're going to send you a penalty via the IRS, and you'll have to pay a ton of money, and maybe you'll have to close up shop, or maybe not, but you're just going to pay a lot of money for doing this. And then everyone will be like, ugh, we don't want to pay the fine, so we're gonna stop hiring these people. Sorry, you're not a legal worker, and so we're not going to hire you. And then everybody's like, shit, there's no jobs in this country, man, and they leave. And so, like, there's precedent for this working, which is the Great Recession. After 2007, we had this big recession. It was coupled with increased enforcement by the Obama administration, but honestly, it was that for like 10 years there weren't really that many jobs to be had. And so people left. Like, I think, even if you like the higher estimates of the total number of illegal immigrants in America, the total amount that the number went down was like 1.5 million over those years, and that's a substantial amount of the net decrease. And then the number of people you deport, of course, is much larger than that. But then the total number went down by like 1.5 million. All the estimates agree. And just do that times five by auditing companies that hire illegal immigrants, and then you don't have to put anyone in like alligator Alcatraz, or send them to a Salvadoran torture dungeon, or do these other things whose purpose is to scare people away.
yes.
You can instead just reduce the pull factors that pull them here.
I mean, why not both, right? I mean, the sort
Because
of
one has much
e-verify.
higher negative side effects, and the other is sufficient. That's why not
I
both.
don't know if it's sufficient.
It will get rid of many millions of illegal immigrants. Will it bring your illegal immigration to zero? No, but neither will turning your country into like an armed camp. I mean, like, the only thing that would bring it to zero is actual, parsley massacre type of genocide, and we're not going to do that. Okay.
Yeah.
Um, so, like, nothing is going to bring it to zero. The the
You could
the the
you could
you
get
know
pretty close to zero, and I think there's value to having deterrence. I think there's value to sort of loudly communicating your goals, and I completely agree. And like the issue of e-verify, it's a huge problem because basically Congress has made it so that you can't make it mandatory. And so and by the way, the Trump administration has done like workplace raids and so on and so forth, because I track this, and you're right, like this is a problem within the Republican coalition, because if they go after employers a little too much, Trump gets an angry phone call from his golf buddies, and so he changes his mind, and then Stephen Miller comes after him, and then changes the policy back again. uh, I I mean, I think deterrence is good. I think it's important to let people know that if they break the law, there are consequences, and that if they come to America illegally, there are going to be consequences, and they might be detained. Um,
Yeah, but then a lot of I mean, every administration detains people. people, right? The Biden administration detained tons of people. The Obama administration detained tons of people. Just look at the detention numbers. I mean, like I could look it up right now.
Well,
Um,
the Biden
ICE existed
administration
under
detained
both of
people and
those.
then released them immediately
Okay, but like if you
from
look at the
EPS.
total stock of people who were detained, you know,
And my understanding is that this is why there
yeah,
was a huge immigration package in the big beautiful bill. Is the Biden wave really was like unprecedentedly large, and so from all the people that I talked to in DHS and CBP and all of that, what they tell me is that the Biden wave was so large there isn't the sufficient infrastructure physically to deport
to
people.
detain all the people. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
because
absolutely
they,
true.
they do need to
That's
be
true.
detained while they're being processed, right? Because
Right?
it is actually they are not actually doing the sort of Dominican thing of like, oh, you're brown, get out, right? They're grabbing people if they don't have papers, they put them in a facility, and then they sort of they actually investigate what their status is. But that required and then if they're illegal, they send them out. Or they put them in front of a judge and then they send them out. So that requires a process, that requires infrastructure, that requires state capacity, which the United States government is not great at historically, generally, but particularly on the issue of immigration enforcement, because there's this huge backlog and it's sort of been neglected for a very very long time. Um,
That's right. I mean, almost any country would be hard pressed to deal with that. Like France certainly would, and they're known for
yeah,
higher state capacity than America.
yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, yeah. We would probably solve it the Dominican way.
But there's another thing we can do, by the way, besides the employer audit thing that I talked about. There's a
Yeah.
second thing you can do, which is you can change asylum law.
Yes.
And you can say that if you come illegally, you are not entitled to asylum
Yeah.
unless there's some special dispensation.
I mean, that was the remain in Mexico policy of the Trump administration, which was Trump one, which was overturned by the Biden administration, which is how you got all of these,
That
as
was
you
not
put
the
it,
Remain in
like
Mexico
legal
policy.
illegal guys.
It was not actually. It that would require the policy I just described of changing the requirements for asylum, requiring you to present yourself at a port of entry.
Right.
That policy has to be passed by Congress because it has to change our fundamental asylum law.
Okay.
And so far,
But
um,
remain in Mexico was like a version of that. Like
Remain in
I don't
Mexico,
remember the legal
it
technical
was
stuff.
attempting
That
to
was the
sort of
same
jury
idea.
rig, a way around
Yes.
the law. But the
Yes.
law needs to be changed. And unfortunately, Trump has never tried to change that law. The law,
Yeah, because
yeah, change the law.
there you can't I mean, right now the amnesty caucus in Congress is too strong, so you're not going to get any law passed. It's very doubtful that you can get any law passed, period. But
It's not a subject for amnesty because these people aren't subject to amnesty.
no, but there's a critical mass of senators in both parties who will not allow any immigration bill to advance unless it contains very large amnesty
Okay.
provisions.
I see. Got it.
Um,
Well, yeah, I see that. So, but
that's
then,
what they meant by comprehensive immigration
okay, but
reform in the
that's,
2010s.
I know, but that's, the first of all, the 2013 bill was good. I think it had amnesty in it. But that aside, you can you can change people's minds on a bill by yelling about it. You can draw attention to the people who are blocking it. I
Yeah,
haven't seen that done. I haven't even seen such a law proposed, saying, "Oh, there's this caucus that'll block it." I mean, like, okay, but at least try. Like, you know, Biden tried, to bring a million bills that got blocked and like yelled about them, and once in a while, one of them would get through. I think that this one's common sense enough. Like, if you explain to people that our asylum law says we can't discriminate in asylum hearings against people who came illegally, people
right.
would think that's nuts, and people would like say, no, that needs to be changed. Even most liberals would say that that's nuts and needs to be changed. Um, Only very hardcore, like committed progressive people who think that, asylum spamming is basically human right,
Yeah,
uh, which includes a lot of lawyers, would um, yeah, I have lawyer friends who was like, wait, no, that's the basic human right. I'm like, no, no, it isn't.
Yeah.
But
Infinite appeal is not a human right.
right. So the right to be not discriminated against in asylum for breaking the law
Right.
is not a basic human right.
Right.
Breaking the law should allow you to be discriminated against in asylum hearing,
Right.
but it's not because of our current law. So someone, people need to yell about this, and I worry. What I actually worry is that the Republicans have no desire to change that law because it allows them to continue having this problem that they must be elected to solve. And maybe that's cynical, but I worry that they don't want to address the root cause. They just want to treat the symptom, kind of like, pharma companies that sell painkillers but don't want to cure underlying diseases. It's like, we'd rather make recurring revenue treating the thing than make one-time revenue fixing the thing.
Okay, so
I worry that. I don't think I know that.
yeah,
I worry about it.
so the thing is, if you want a kind of like quote unquote common sense immigration bill passed, like the kind of bill that you and I would agree on,
Mhm.
uh, and presumably, like if you create like a super committee of like Noah and Peg, like you would get a bill that every reasonable conservative and every reasonable liberal would agree with. Um, if you want that bill passed with a Republican president and a Republican majority, you need to convince, because Republican voters and Republican activists are traumatized by the 1986 event when Reagan passed an amnesty bill, and the bill included both amnesty and enforcement provisions, and the amnesty was implemented, but the enforcement never happened. And so, if you
Wait, no,
want
the corporate
Republicans
enforcement was
to
stripped out,
agree,
right?
what?
Wait, the corporate side. I mean, they added some border patrol people, agents in that, but the corporate side was stripped out. Like the they were going to have um, not e-verify, but a similar system where you'd
Right.
have to do that, and they took it out of the bill. It wasn't in the '86 bill,
Yeah. Yeah.
but it was in the
No.
2013 bill.
Conser- uh, I don't remember the details of the 2013 bill off the
I
top of my
think
head.
I'm pretty sure like
I
e-verify was in that 2013 bill. Hold on, let me make sure.
I don't
Let me
remember
make sure.
a single bill that came close to
Yes, it
passing
did. The
in the
e-verify was
time
in
that.
the bill that failed in the Senate
Yeah. Well, they
in
all fell in the Senate.
2013. It included amnesty, but included enforcement, actual like robust enforcement instead of. And so 1986 added a bunch of border patrol agents, but they didn't do much. Right, it
Yeah.
didn't have much effect because it stripped out the corporate side of enforcement. But
Yeah.
then in the late 90s and early 2000s, we added a lot of real enforcement. We built fencing along all the main crossing points, which made it much harder and more dangerous to cross. We really increased the number of border patrol a lot, and we also cut immigrants off of various forms of federal welfare in 1996. But enforcement in terms of a big fence and a lot more border patrol happened, and you can look at research saying this had a major effect under George W. Bush. Enforcement didn't solve the problem, but it worked. And one of the reasons why the giant illegal immigration boom of the 90s and early 2000s came to an end, one reason was the Great Recession, but one reason was massively stepped up enforcement. So we didn't get an 86, but it's not to say that enforcement is powerless.
I'm I I'm making a different point. I'm not saying there was never any enforcement ever. I'm making a different point, which is that if you want a majority of Republican voters and elected officials to sign on to a common sense immigration bill, you need to first establish trust that you are serious about enforcement. And so my sort of, if I was a conspiracy theorist, which of course I'm not,
Mhm.
I would think that that's Trump's plan. I would think that that is what he actually wants to do, because he's actually a moderate on immigration, right? um he wants to spend like 3 years enforcing maximally, and then during year 4 he's gonna, you know, throw Stephen Miller in the mouth of the Sarlacc, and then do an amazing bipartisan immigration deal with Chuck Schumer and John Thune and the Chamber of Commerce. And but the only way that bill is going to pass is if he's first deported, 10 million aliens or whatever, some very, very big number. Because for all that you just said about enforcement and all that, like the illegal population in the US has been growing. Maybe there were years where it was sort of flat or a little bit down, but like over the past 20 years it's just been growing massively. Like it's impossible to walk around and not see it. So there is an issue here. And if you want voters who care about immigration to sort of be willing to hear out a lot of the very reasonable stuff you said, which I agree is very reasonable, you first have to sort of earn some trust. And maybe that's irrational, but it's also very human. And the way you earn trust is by doing, ICE raids and, memes on Twitter about immigrants getting deported.
Whose trust are you earning?
Republican voters who are who care deeply about illegal immigration, but are not, full on restrictionists.
Republican voters.
Yes,
So that
the
Republicans in Congress will
the
support them.
median Republican voter is extremely angry about immigration. Because of that issue, and B, because it's a sort of synecdoche for elites not being responsive, government not being responsive, democracy not being responsive, and so on and so forth. And we can talk about these broader issues. And so he's very, very angry about immigration, and especially illegal immigration. But he's also like not a restrictionist in the sense that his ideal immigration policy would be like zero legal immigration forever.
Right.
There's zero constituency for that in the Republican Party. There's less constituency for that than there is for open borders in the Democratic Party.
Right. So
But he's not going to
you
listen to arguments about legal immigration until he stopped being angry about illegal immigration, and he's only going to stop being angry at illegal immigration when he sees a raid uh, down the street from him, when he sees that the population Costco is,
right.
the population is different, and so on and
But
so
we
forth.
see Trump's approval rating on immigration falling. And it's falling, I believe, among Republicans too, although it's from a very high base.
Yeah,
But it's falling a little bit. And so some people like I I'm not sure I've seen evidence of the trust being built. I maybe it's there. People still approve of Trump on border security, but
yeah.
then approval of Trump on immigration in general has gone down because people see these abuses. They see the ICE raids everywhere. They see they hear about the, you know, alligator Alcatraz. Don't call it a concentration camp. They hear about the detention centers and they hear about
I mean,
the
it's a
like,
meme. It's a detention center, and they made a moat around it, and they called it Alligator Alcatraz because it's in
hmm,
Florida. It's just a detention center.
yeah. What's the conceptual difference between detention centers and concentration camps, by the way, just out of curiosity?
I don't. I I think it. I think it's all fake.
I mean, how do I tell when one of those words is the only appropriate word, or versus when the other word is appropriate as well?
I've never given that issue much thought. I mean, it's a mix of why are people sent there, and B, what happens to them while they're there. As
I think
far as
that's
I
accurate.
know,
I think
nobody is
that's accurate.
being sent to alligator, alligator, Alcatraz for being Jewish or gay or communist. Um, Not yet, anyway. Dun dun dun. And look, I haven't looked at the reports about how horrible it is there, but I would bet a good amount of money that we haven't reached Auschwitz tier yet.
True,
I,
but I mean, I think that most concentration camps throughout history are not death camps. For example, the Boer concentration camps that the British
sure.
used in the Boer War were the original. That was where the name came from, I believe.
That's what I heard, because the term concentration camp just means detention center, right? It's just we
I
no
think
longer
it,
use it because it's tainted.
right, right, and I think it means. I think if you have a detention center where people are sent there for group characteristics instead of individual actions,
Yeah.
then I think that's kind of the salient thing to me. That if we want to backfill this term with a meaningful definition that we can then apply.
Sure, but I again, like I there's some sense in which it's ridiculous to even have this conversation, because the idea that, whenever we're discussing detention, we have to like go back into World War II history to find out whether we're doing a Hitler or not. I find kind of silly. Like, the French Republic used to have the bagne, which were labor camps in French Guiana, so in the jungle. They were pretty bad. Like the
Yeah,
detention there was famously very bad. And they sent Alfred Dreyfus most famously, but like also the people
right.
who were sent there, apart from Dreyfus, who was innocent, were mostly sent for like, murder and robbery and rape and so on and so forth. Do I lose sleep over the fact that, my country under a democratic regime sent people to like a pretty gross labor camp, but also, usually only murderers? Like, I don't, I honestly don't really care.
I mean, I
And I certainly
I would
wouldn't
I
care
would
if
care.
we reinstated it
I would care.
tomorrow.
I think that's
I mean, I would be very happy
that's
for
not.
France to create alligator Alcatraz in French Guiana.
I mean, those French Guiana labor camps are pretty horrible, man. Like the conditions in them were really horrible. Like I don't think
Yeah,
that any those people deserve to be treated like that, especially because, as you noted, some people were sent there who by accident, and then oops, you if you're sent to some people are always going to be sent to a place by accident. There will be accidents, and you know
in practice, it's very very
yeah,
low. Like
really. Okay,
yes.
but what's low? I mean, like it depends. If your total number of people is like 100,000, and you have like a 0.1% thing. That's a significant number of people. So.
I mean, I find this whole discussion so funny because, of course, um, uh,
I'm trying to explain. I'm trying
how
to
many
explain the
girls raped by
viewpoint.
illegal immigrants are, the right number? How many, like, we're focusing on the pain and the suffering of, either criminals or illegal immigrants, depending on what we're like speculating about,
Right.
which I it's just something that I'm not interested in, because what I'm interested in is the health and welfare of my fellow citizens. And so, in the case of the Guyana camp hypothesis, I'm interested in the health and welfare of normal law abiding French citizens, which is improved if there's strong deterrence against people committing murder and robbery and rape and arson. And in the case of illegal immigration, again, there are very significant harms that come to very ordinary people due to unchecked mass third world immigration. And I have a lot more empathy for them than I have for anybody who decided to break the immigration laws of any sort of civilized country that I care about. And so you know,
Now I have a question for you. I have a
I
question for
don't
you.
want them. I don't want us to be like actively sadistic towards them or like throw them in a volcano or anything. But beyond that, I really don't care. And
Okay.
maybe you think that's just horribly cruel. I just think
Well,
it's
some
normal.
people are gonna think that is cruel, and you have to accept that some people care about that. Like people care, but I think you're right that we should also focus on the benefits of mass deportations and carried out by various mechanisms. So you were talking about like mass detention in bad conditions, but we get at the end of the day we get a benefit. We get fewer people, fewer of the illegal immigrants in the country.
Yes.
And so here's a question: in the United States, I'm not talking about France
Yeah.
because we're bigger. That's where I am right now. In the United States, if you were to uh, deport 10 million illegal immigrants, let's say,
Yeah.
would the total number of native born Americans who get victimized by violent crime go up or would it go down?
The total number of Native Americans who were
The total
victimized.
number of native born Americans. So I'm saying, suppose we don't care, or let's say native born Americans and legal immigrants. Okay. So
Right, right, right.
but people who are in the country lawfully, who are not illegal immigrants, would the total number of violent victimizations of those people increase or decrease if we were to deport 10 million illegal immigrants?
I mean, it would decrease. Are we going to do the whole like illegal immigrant crime rate thing?
So illegal immigrant crime rate doesn't quite answer this. If it were illegal immigrant crime rate, we'd know the answer right off the top of our head. But the thing is that since most of the crimes committed by illegal immigrants are against other illegal immigrants, it doesn't answer the question that I was asking, which is
Oh,
about
I see.
victimization of people who are legally in the country.
Right.
So I don't actually know the answer to this. It depends on some parameters that we don't really know. But I did some guesstimation and I had AI do some guesstimation, and
Right.
it looks like the total change would be about zero. Because again, like you said, illegal immigrants have a lower crime rate than the native born. Um,
Sort
and
of.
then yeah, I mean they do, like, on average. It's just an average, right?
Yeah.
Like they have a
Yes.
lower crime rate than the native born on average. And since a vastly disproportionate amount of those victimizations are against other illegal immigrants,
Yeah.
basically illegal immigrants are living in these mostly living in these enclaves where they don't encounter other people much. And when they do, it's usually through like going to work, where they're not going to, those are the people who do work and they're not going to commit a lot of crimes. The crimes they do commit are against others of their own kind in their own neighborhoods, primarily. And so, because of that, I think that if you're looking at the safety of people like me, citizens of
Yes.
America, the native born, my safety is statistically, on average, I don't know about me personally, right? But
Right.
statistically, on average, it's not enhanced by all those mass deportations. I don't become a safer person statistically, I think.
So okay. So couple things there.
So where am I
Uh,
benefiting? Where am I benefiting from the mass
so
deportation? What do I
first of
get?
all, it would. So first of all, it certainly wouldn't make you worse off, right? In terms of public safety, it wouldn't cause an
It might make me
increase
a little
in
bit worse off.
crime
It might
if
make
you.
me a tiny bit worse off. It largely unchanged. Let's assume it's
Secondly,
yeah, let's assume that
secondly,
it's exactly zero instead of almost zero.
empirically, the links between illegal immigration, certainly in the US, and sort of organized transnational crime and drug trafficking are so real and so extensive. Like every human trafficking network is also a drug trafficking network and vice versa, right? And and drug cartels in the US have distribution networks in the US in part because there has been a laissez-faire, relatively laissez-faire attitude towards enforcing immigration laws, right? And so you're sort of math uh you're sort of purely abstract sort of percentage calculation just doesn't take account the fact that if you're removing en masse these sort of enclaves, as you said, because most illegal immigrants live in these enclaves,
In
which
enclaves,
ensures
yeah.
that most of the crimes they commit, but you're also by definition uh striking a huge blow against all sort of South American and South American originated transnational crime, which includes all sorts of horrible human trafficking, and which, of course, includes the drugs and the drug epidemic in the U.S. And yes, the fentanyl that does come from. I mean, the some some ingredients are made in China, and then they get them to Mexico, and they do the final manufacturing in Mexico, and then they bring it to the U.S.
And
So
this is not
again,
counted as a
like
violent
in the
crime.
real world,
just
Like,
to
yes,
support what you're saying.
absolutely, like criminality would just drop like a rock, and it would be much beyond, the probability of sort of Noah Smith getting stabbed while he's walking to the store. And another point about, those who gets victimized by those crimes, like a lot of those communities also have a lot of legal immigrants, right? They have a lot of, Salvadoran Americans or whatever who are legal citizens, and they're disproportionately also the victims of illegal immigrant gang related crime, right? It's like it's women who are being pimped, it's who are being forced to work as drug mules or lookouts or whatever, or just generally the criminality of, lawless, poor areas. And so those people who are US citizens also deserve protection from that kind of crime. And so Noah
The
Smith,
argument here is that we shouldn't
economist,
look at
commentator,
violent
his
crime
crime
rates.
rate isn't going to be
We should look
affected,
at
but like poor
indirect crime
minority US
indirectly caused
citizens
by like the
in
drug
poor
trade and things like
areas,
that.
their crime rate, their
Is that what you're asking?
probability of being victimized by crime will change. Sorry, I just finished my point, so I didn't hear what you were saying.
Sorry. I
It's
was
not a
saying, so
debate if
you're
I don't talk over you.
if so you're basically saying that the indirect effect on crime rates via curbing of the drug trade would be in addition to whatever direct violent crime rates we observe. And so, because when people import fentanyl into the country, it's not counted as a violent crime,
Right,
but it could encourage violent crime because then people fight over the fentanyl or
right,
whatever later on down the chain. And maybe those people are citizens or legal immigrants or whoever,
right,
right? And so it gets counted as non-illegal immigrant crime, but the links would be broken, thus
right,
making drug enforcement easier.
right.
Okay, yeah, I buy that that's possible. I'm not 100% sure how true that is, but I buy that that's possible. That asylum seekers, even if they don't carry the fentanyl with them, because if you turn yourself in with fent, because remember these almost all this so-called illegal immigration right now is people crossing the border illegally and then immediately turning themselves into the authorities, right? It's quasi-legal,
Right.
right? And so
Well,
those
that was
people,
true under the Biden administration because they had the
yeah,
CPB program. So they were inviting people to do this. It was essentially like a way
but it's also our law.
of
It's our
just
basic
like
law.
bringing in, as large amounts of people as possible with
But
just
you
no
could,
vetting and just like the thinnest veneer of legality.
what I'm saying is that this is our law. Our law says that you have to do that. That is America's asylum law.
I mean, it is a sort of extremely, um
I don't like the law, but it is our law.
tendentious interpretation of the law.
Not necessarily. No, it's not, because the law very clearly states that that asylum claims cannot discriminate against people based on whether they enter the
No,
country legally or illegally.
I understand that,
And
but
that law ought to be changed. That law ought to be changed, but it is our law.
there's lots of technicalities in every direction because of there's the credible fear standard, and so you have to like
Okay.
show credible fear. Except that the way people
No,
show
but
credible fear is
wait a
totally,
second.
you know,
Oh, I
people's
understand, but what I'm
explanations
saying
are
is that
taken at face value.
listen, the credible fear standard determines whether people will be given asylum once they get the hearing. And in fact, that is the basis for the fact that we deny most asylum applicants because they don't have credible fear. They're just economic migrants and we boot them out. That's what we do to most asylum seekers. The problem is that because of that law that I described, we're not allowed to, when they turn themselves into the Border Patrol, we're not allowed to simply put them in a truck, drive them back, and say bye.
Yes,
We're
no, I
not allowed to do
understand that.
that. They have to get a hearing. And so that's the law that's the problem. And that's the law that I think should be changed, but currently is the law. And so um, nobody who does that is going to have fentanyl on them when they turn themselves in, because then you're arrested with fentanyl. So maybe some people could like plant fentanyl in the desert and remember where to come back and get it. But then primarily, um, what you're talking about is human networks that the quasi legal immigrants that are then in the country
I mean,
send text messages to the mafia and help them smuggle drugs in by being their person on their contact on the other side.
as far as I know, I've never seen anybody dispute that the networks that traffic people across the border are the same networks as the networks that traffic drugs across the
They may
border,
be, but
and that they're linked to
I
the
assume they are. They are the same
distribution
networks.
networks
I agree.
in
But what I'm
American
saying,
cities that cause all of the violent crime, because then there are fights over drug turf and like all of the crime that comes with drug trafficking.
100% agree. However, however, it's not clear that so border security, obviously, stopping people at the border, catching more people at the border will obviously disrupt those networks. But why does mass deportation disrupt those networks? That's what I'm trying to get at here. Because remember,
Oh,
the overall question is, how does mass deportation help Noah Smith? How do I benefit as an American person from this? What do I get? And this is trying to answer that question.
right. Um, I mean, so first of all, the problem is those. I mean, those networks sort of continue to exist in those enclaves. I mean, I don't know how else. I don't understand. I guess I don't understand what you're not understanding, which is like, you know,
If
I'm
I
I'm
deport
I'm
people, how does that disrupt the drug trade?
I'm Bob in El Salvador. I pay $10,000 to a guy to get me to across the border. Some other guy picks me up and gets me to New York, where I start to wash dishes or whatever.
Okay,
That entire thing was executed by a very large, very organized transnational criminal network.
I see. So the idea is you start off as a mule and then you claim asylum.
I
You
don't
drop
know
off
exactly
you
where
come
the
across the border with
process
your tent.
is. I just it just seems obvious to me that you can't uh, deport large numbers of people who came in through those networks without disrupting those networks.
Okay. All right. Um, so even though I don't entirely understand the mechanism by which the networks are disrupted, I'm open to the possibility that there is such disruption, but I would like to see some empirical evidence that this works. Do you know of any?
I I'm not a criminal. I mean, it just seems so
We
obvious
all
to
have
me
AI
that
now, man. We all have AI to do a literature search. We could just ask the robot.
I don't have a study on water being wet either. I mean, it just seems like
we can't
because
we can't just say
those
sounds legit and make policy on sounds legit. Like we need some evidence here, and we've done lots of deportations. We've done mass deportations, and we should be able to tell.
yeah, we should.
So let me ask a robot real quick. Do we have evidence
Are you
of
asking
whether?
ChatGPT right now?
Yeah, yeah, I am asking ChatGPT of whether mass deportations disrupt drug networks into the U.S. And at some point it'll come up with an answer, and then we'll have an answer, some of which may be hallucinated, but we can always go run it down and check.
Yes.
So,
Are you doing deep research?
no, O3, which is the engine behind deep research, but is a little faster.
Right.
It will get the things without like asking follow up questions. Anyway, and it won't be as long. Um, so, all right, but I'm not telling you you're wrong. Okay, I'm saying I want to
Yeah.
understand the case because we've talked about the
Yeah, we
potential
haven't been
harms of
fighting
mass
enough.
deportation.
This is terrible television.
Yeah, but we've talked about the potential harms, but I want to understand like what I as an American get, and I think honestly you've so far missed the big one, which is the fiscal cost of providing for all these people at the local and state level. That's the thing that
There's
made all the
that.
New
I mean,
Yorkers
I didn't.
mad.
There's that. Yeah, absolutely.
I think that's the main cost that New Yorkers got mad about because
I
people
mean,
were getting,
certainly in blue states, it is
yeah,
enormous.
yeah, it's enormous. Even
Because
in red states, there's some government support. It's not zero,
yes, yes,
and so it's
and
big. It's
this is
really
the
big.
other thing about the liberal talking point about, oh, illegal immigrants don't get benefits, except that the enforcement is up to the states, and it's very well known that especially that in quote unquote sanctuary states, they basically they basically don't, well, they don't ask for your status,
Well,
and
they do
so
get
you can
state
just,
benefits. They
it's
get
based
state
on the
benefits.
honor system, and so you
But
know,
they already do get state benefits and local benefits depending
yes,
on state and local law. That's always been true.
yeah,
And if states and some programs are block granted to the states, and the states can
yeah,
do whatever they want with it,
yes,
and the federal government can't
yes,
determine who that gets given to.
yeah.
Anything that the states do can be, and in fact, this is the main fiscal
Right, right,
cost
right. I'm
of
saying
immigration.
they explicitly give benefits to illegal aliens, but also in the case
They
where
do,
they're not allowed to give the benefits, they still give it to them because they don't enforce the prohibitions.
right?
This is well known about Medicaid in California. I don't know specifically about Medicaid in New York. There's several
Okay,
other pieces.
so the GPT-03 is finished. Do
Okay,
you want to hear what it says?
sure.
All right, well, consult the robot. I love robots. It says, so far, no rigorous empirical study shows that deporting a large number of non-citizens meaningfully interrupts the flow of fentanyl, cocaine, meth, or other drugs into the United States. The available evidence instead suggests that most illicit drug couriers caught at or inside the border are U.S. citizens using ports of entry, not migrants arrested between them. Interior deportations overwhelmingly remove longtime residents whose most serious offense is low-level drug possession or sales, not cartel logisticians. After 2 decades of high deportation rates, U.S. street prices, purity, availability, and overdose deaths has showed no sustained improvement. Large-scale removals can even feed criminal groups abroad by delivering experienced recruits to gangs and cartels in Mexico.
Did that last one was hilarious. It's like, no, removing them doesn't reduce crime because they're not criminal, and also it increases crime in other countries because they're you're exporting criminals to other countries. There
Right?
was also another sleight of hand in the idea that immigrants who with drugs in the U.S. are small time, or they're just arrested for possession. Overwhelmingly, when somebody's, it's like, oh, there are nonviolent drug offenders in prison. It's that the offense was bargained down, but the actual fact is that that person was caught dealing drugs, and then they took a plea deal so that there wouldn't be a trial. But like that person was
I mean, that's
absolutely
what a
dealing
nonviolent
drugs.
drug offense is. Like,
What? Yeah.
yeah, it wasn't you're not talking about a violent offense changed to a nonviolent offense through a plea bargain.
Yes. Well, okay, but you
Though
understand what I'm.
occasionally that does happen, but it's pretty rare.
Uh, it's like 99% of the time, like 99% of or 90 something percent of criminal convictions in the US are plea bargains.
Sure, but you don't. Violent offenses typically do not get changed to non-violent offenses in the plea bargain. If
Oh,
you
right, I
bargain it
see.
down to a lower offense in the same category, so you could bargain
Yes, 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 yes,
felony
yes.
assault to misdemeanor assault. I don't know,
Right, right. Well, yes. So, but
or
like
felony possession to misdemeanor
if
possession.
right, if somebody's in prison for possession, it's not because they were caught, smoking a joint. It's because they were actively dealing and they got plea bargained down to possession. And so I'm just pointing that out in context of the GPT's O3 saying, illegal immigrants who get arrested in the U.S. Mostly just get arrested for possession or nonviolent offenses. It's like, well, that's most likely due to the plea bargaining system. It doesn't mean that they're not involved in serious crime.
It's just because that's just base rates, man. That's the fact that most offenses are nonviolent.
Sure.
Like
Anyway,
that. So yeah. Anyway, um, but I mean, I don't think violent offenses are getting plea bargained away. It's just that most offenses are nonviolent to begin with. Anyway, so I guess the idea is, what do I get from mass deportation? I get lower taxes at the federal, state, and local level by some
yeah,
amount, uh, a bit of lower taxes, and then I get potentially, if you believe Peg and not the robot, I will get less fent in the country,
yeah,
less
which is pretty
inoculation.
big. Like you will get. lower organized crime, you will get lower disorder, because there are forms of disorder that are broader than crime. I remember, I'm old enough when there was this guy on Fox called Tucker Carlson who was canceled for saying that
Well, you are
illegal
old.
immigrants make cities dirty, quote unquote. But like, there are absolutely cultural norms around littering, and they differ by population, and like there's absolutely a link. And like there are all sorts of forms of disorder and decline of quality of life that come with mass illegal third world immigration. So public safety, taxes, and generally a sort of a greater sense of democratic responsiveness and accountability, because you will have the justified feeling of living in a country where, the laws that are written on the book get enforced, and the government enforces the laws, instead of living in this very bizarre world where, uh, everybody knows that there's one set of laws on the books, but that's not the real law that exists in the real world, and everybody obeys by a different set of laws, which is incredibly corrosive to public trust, trust in institutions, trust in democracy, and so on and so forth. Denmark is a very good example of this. I was speaking with somebody from Denmark recently, who, as our viewers may know, is the sort of case study for like very strong anti-immigration policies by a sort of center-left government. And he was saying, like, on top of like the benefits to like crime and public safety and so on and so forth, there was a sort of renewal of civic and democratic engagement, because people were like, oh, you know, we say we want this, we vote for it, and then we get it. Like that, the system works. That's good, right? And that's definitely something that America needs right now.
Yeah, I mean, maybe, but when I look at Trump, and I think, you know, when I look at Trump's actual actions on immigration, I see trust falling. I see disapproval, rising, uh, and Trump underwater on immigration, which was a signature issue. And I think a lot of your case here that this is ultimately a good thing rests on this sort of supposition that this is some kind of preamble, that this is some kind of inevitable base satisfying move before Trump pivots to a reasonable compromise.
I didn't
We
I
talked about that.
no, I sort of floated it as a sort of semi serious conspiracy theory. I'm not
Okay.
saying
Okay.
this is
You don't think
Trump's
this is
agenda
actually
and this
likely.
is like, I think
Understood.
I would like that to be true. I would like for the Trump and the Trump administration to sort of solve the illegal immigration problem in a way that's so decisive that it sort of moves the country to a different chapter, and then people can have the actual important discussion, which is what's the kind of immigration system we want. Now that we know that we can enforce the laws, now that we know that it's not a big joke to change the law or to rewrite the law, what kind of law do we want? I absolutely want that. and, and I think it's a necessary, not sufficient, but necessary preliminary step. But I also think that the illegal immigration problem is worth solving on its own. It's just so alien to civilization and good government to like just have like millions of people in your country just because they showed up one day. And then you're like, oh, but they've been here for a very long time, so I guess they just get to stay here now. Like, that's deranged. It I really think it's a very serious. It's a public safety problem. It's a
So you
economic
feel that
problem, and so on and so forth.
for you personally, mass deportations build your trust in the system.
Yes.
And that makes sense. And I'm sure that there's a non trivial number of people who think like you, who think like that, and who agree with you. But when I look at what the average American thinks, I don't see people taking heart from this policy. I don't see trust in our institutions rising from the ICE deportation rampage. I don't see it. I don't see this in the data. I see disapproval
I
rising.
mean, it's only been going on for 6 months.
Fair.
I haven't looked at the polls, and
Okay.
I'm a policy guy. I very deliberately don't look. I mean, I look at issue polls, but I don't look at like Trump polls. So I don't have an opinion on like which polls are good or bad, and so on and so forth. And there are definitely fake polls out there. Like that's not a conspiracy
But
theory or
there's a
just like
lot
very
of
bad polls.
polls on this topic, and then the aggregators like Nate Silver
Yeah.
and G. Elliott Morris and these other guys try to do their best to figure out what's
Yeah.
going on, look at the quality of the polls, and I understand that polls aren't a perfect guide to public opinion. There's many problems with polls,
Yeah.
but I don't see. Um, yeah, maybe out there trust is silently being built, but it doesn't. It doesn't look like it. I don't see it. I just see people who, the minority of people who are just enraged about immigration, think, yeah, get them. This is the thing we've been waiting for a long time. And of course, there are people who, from all the way from like the 80s and 90s have just been like, get them out, and just been yet getting increasingly mad since the 80s and 90s about this. And those people are going to be pleased. Like, there was never a time when you thought this wasn't a problem, right?
There was, yeah.
When? When did you think this wasn't a
Before
problem?
Trump.
Like under Obama?
Yeah.
Huh. That's interesting because we had a wave of asylum seekers, all
Oh,
those unaccompanied
you
children, and
could Google it. I wrote columns in favor of immigration amnesty in like 2014,
I
2015.
see. And it was
I got
when did you
radicalized.
change your mind about this?
When America elected a crazy orange guy.
Then you agreed with the crazy orange guy's policies because of he's a crazy orange guy?
Well, the open question is like what level of immigration is sustainable without causing too much sort of social and political and cultural disruption. And the fact that your country elects a crazy orange guy is a pretty good hint that, you know, you've hit that point and you
Right.
should therefore backtrack. It wasn't like a overnight thing. Oh, Trump won, therefore I completely changed my mind on immigration. But like the fact that so many Americans were so passionate about this and sort of prioritizing this over everything else absolutely made me think, oh, like I'm the one who's missing something here. I'm the one who doesn't fully understand what is happening. And I couldn't tell you like a moment where I became sort of extremely anti-immigration, but yeah, that it's a sort of I say that jokingly, but yeah, it's kind of ipso facto. And again, if you believe in democracy, as we all do, it is kind of ipso facto the case. Like if I'm not saying every poll is right, and when 51% of the country says something, it must be right every time. But when you have this level of public dissatisfaction for so long, it should tell you something. Um, and so I learned more about fentanyl. I learned more about what was happening in sort of white working class communities in the Midwest of the U.S. I learned more about wages and so on and so forth, and I became radicalized, absolutely. And now I absolutely believe that it's you know the most important issue for America, for Europe, and that it sort of preconditions everything else, because it both on its own and because it's a symbol and a kind of synecdoche for a host of other issues related to public trust, related to whether government exists for the interest of the whole population or an elite, and so on and so forth. And so, yeah,
Okay.
so that's my answer to your question. No, I haven't. I was pro immigration because I was a like good enlightened elite. Uh, white
Okay.
collar, graduate degree, blah blah
Yeah.
blah
Well,
person.
let me ask you a follow-up question then, which is what would what is there any degree to which Trump could overstep in his immigration policy that would make you change your mind about this and think, okay, the costs of this policy are too high?
Right.
And what would that
Uh,
be? What would that look like? What would make you change your mind on that?
I mean, I can imagine like immigration policies that I would disagree with, but like Trump couldn't legally do them, right? The most thing he can do is like deport people who are already here, and I'm okay with that. And I mean, or I mean, we can come up with like science fiction scenarios where he sends death squads into alligator Alcatraz and blah blah blah. But that's not going to happen. We all know that.
You don't really need science for that. We have the weapons.
Yeah, we have the weapons.
We don't need to invent anything. It doesn't need to be AI doing it. I don't know. But yeah,
I
so you think death squads, or mass execution of illegal immigrants would flip
Yeah,
you would
I
flip
would
you on this?
consider that a bridge too far. I So an open question for me is the extent of the economic disruption,
Hmm.
um, and because I do think that if you start, because now there's such a backlog of criminals and unemployed people, but the big open question is what happens when they start actually hitting into like people who are employed and so on and so forth. And I fully expect some level of economic disruption, which I don't mind, but I think it's an open question just how much there will be. That being said, in some, I don't want to say perverse way, but in sort of paradoxical way, the more economic disruption there is, the more that I would see that as evidence that the system was just fundamentally broken and really needed to be resetted. Like if it really is the case that the American economy absolutely needs, you know, $5 an hour waiters or whatever, it absolutely needs this sort of like servant caste uh to operate, then it's all the more evidence that we need to shift to a very different system very quickly. Um,
So
uh,
economic stuff is not going to make you change your mind, but death squads would. I have one more. What if we start seeing? What if we start seeing uh, U.S. large numbers
yeah,
of U.S. citizens detained or deported?
yeah. I mean, yes. Like if there was some sort of like crazy thing where yes,
Okay.
sure. I mean,
What if?
I
Here's another one. What
yeah,
if Trump, in suppose with or without the Supreme Court's blessing, but what if Trump changes the law on birthright citizenship to strip citizenship from people whose ancestors were illegal immigrants or suspected of being illegal immigrants? And so we have mass stripping of citizenship from large numbers of
I
American
mean,
citizens.
suspected of. I mean, obviously, if it's suspected of being illegal
When I'm saying
immigrants, it's like
suspected, I
a
mean you
giant
can't prove they
loophole.
were legal, and so therefore you don't have citizenship.
Oh, right. So so basically everybody would have to prove that their ancestors were legal.
After some certain date,
Otherwise,
let's
they
say,
get
when they think that proof is available, because obviously for my ancestors who came in the late 1800s or early 1900s, there was no proof,
right,
there was no proof of legality because we didn't have those systems in place yet. But
right.
suppose that we say, okay, so if you came since some term 1965, I don't know,
Yes.
whenever, and then and we can't prove that that your ancestors came legally, we can strip you of citizenship and then send you to alligator Alcatraz, and then or deport you to El Salvador, wherever the fuck.
Uh,
What about that? Because that is sort of what I painted as the worst case scenario in Trump's first term. I said, this anti-immigrant backlash, how far could this go? What's the worst thing I can possibly think of that we might actually do? And it was that. And I came up with
well,
this idea in 2017, so a long time ago.
I mean, you saw, and it's just a meme. It's not going to happen. But you saw the thing about Mamdani, right? Which is there is a legal provision that basically, if you're a naturalized U.S. citizen and you're a communist, that means that basically it the law presumes that you must have lied during your naturalization process about being a communist, and that therefore
We can strip your
you can be
citizenship of that.
stripped of citizenship and deported.
We do have a law that allows you to do that, perfectly legal.
I,
Okay.
if
So
Trump
suppose one of
started
your
sort of
ancestors,
vigorously enforcing that law, I mean, if
no,
there would be a threshold where I'd be fine, and there would probably be a threshold where I would no longer be fine.
right, and keep in mind, by the way, I'm not talking about stripping citizenship from people who naturalize, which the law you're discussing is about
Right.
stripping citizenship
Yes.
from people who naturalized.
Right.
That law will not allow you to strip citizenship from the kids of those people.
Yes.
So if
Yes.
you lie
Well,
and say I'm
I
not a
understand
communist
that's
and you are a
different. I
communist,
understand that's different from the question you asked.
right,
I'm just
right.
like,
I'm talking about stripping citizenship from people based on their ancestry.
well,
Would that be enough
whether
to turn you?
whether their parents came here illegally is not exactly the same thing as their ancestry, right? Because
I'm talking about their parents or their grandparents, let's say.
uh,
Or
I
just
d-
say parents. Just say parents. Your parents came here illegally. You're born here. You're because they came illegally, you're not a citizen and you must now leave. What about that?
I I I'm trying to come up with a way of saying, I'm not wild about it, but I also wouldn't, like light my hair on fire and start,
If people were punished with revocation of citizenship for what their parents did, that wouldn't
well,
that's I can't think of a single case where we punish people for the crimes of their parents in this country or where we ever have.
yeah, you're right. Yeah, I guess. Yeah. Yeah. No, I would disagree with that policy.
So for me, that
Um,
would be like, I mean, I don't support Trump's mass deportation policy in the first place because I think it's, there's much easier alternatives that are much less disruptive. But
yes.
I think, but I think that policy that I just described of punishing
Yes.
people with citizenship stripping for their parents being illegal immigrants, which I think is on the table. Uh, they discuss it, they talk about doing it. Um,
I've
that would
literally
scare the
never
hell out of
heard
me. I would
this.
be
I
really
mean,
scared.
I swear I'm not trying to dodge your question or like, but
You
like
didn't
I've
dodge it. You
literally
didn't dodge it.
never heard this.
Okay, you didn't dodge it at all. I'm not accusing you of dodging it. You did not. You addressed it. I'm saying that I have heard this being discussed, and I could send links, whatever. Um, and that that is a policy that would deeply scare me, and make me think. I'm like
No, I understand.
I'm not living in a country with basic human rights.
I understand. I understand. Yeah, I think it would be a dumb policy. The reason why I'm being so hesitant is that we draw this bright line between legal and illegal, citizen and non-citizen, and rightly so, because those are important and meaningful legal categories. But at the same time, there's a bunch of people who got citizenship who probably, if the law had been well designed, wouldn't have gotten citizenship. And so I understand the point you're making, like denaturalizing someone because they're of something their parents did. I agree that's a bridge too far, but denaturalizing someone because they should never have been naturalized to begin with is not something that I object to as a matter of principle.
So denaturalizing someone
And
who
by the
lied about
way,
being in the country.
my preferred version of this policy is you should never have been naturalized to begin with. Goodbye. Here's a big check. Here's a check for like 2 years of your past income. Go build a new life in Uganda, Mr. Mamdani. Good luck to you. Best of luck to you.
Is Mom Donnie naturalized?
I don't think that would be terribly inhumane or Nazi.
I see. All right. Well, I think that's a good place to stop. I
Okay.
can't think of. I think that we've basically covered like the main. we didn't talk about things like high skilled immigration or
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
cultural
we
impacts.
we basically didn't talk about economics, even though you're supposed to be an economics
Yeah,
guy.
well, we could have a follow up where we do another, but I got to go eat lunch.
Yeah, and I've got to go eat dinner because we live in a big planet.
Yeah, but this is
We have
fun, and this is fun. I liked it. We could do it again. Um,
sure.
yeah, I think
Yeah,
we covered basically the whole issue of mass deportation and illegal
yeah,
immigration and
yeah.
quasi
We
legal
did. We
immigration and
did.
all that.
Yeah, we did mostly deportation, but not really the economics of immigration.
Right.
All
Next
right.
time we could talk about should we be bringing in lots of people legally, and
Yes.
what should
Yes.
that look like?
Yes. Yes.
Cool. All right.
All
Well,
right.
signing
Cool.
off. Talk to you later.
Bye. Ciao.